A close adjunct to the climate narrative that the media has is materialism over maternalism. And this story in Bloomberg really highlights this narrative. And the title is Women Who Stay Single and Don't Have Kids Are Getting Richer. And the subtitle, Foregoing Marriage and Parenthood Has a Bigger Payoff for American Women Than Men, according to new research. On the surface, really exciting stuff. I could be rich without kids. So let me read you a couple of passages. Single women without kids had an average of $65,000 in wealth in 2019, compared with $57,000 for single child-free men, according to the Federal Reserve. And single mothers only had $7,000. That means women who don't have kids are $8,000 richer than child-free men. That sounds like a great deal. So then the article starts to get more and more suspicious as you go. Parenthood was losing its appeal even before COVID-19, and the hardship brought on by the pandemic appears to have accelerated the trend. And a Pew Research Center study last year found that 44% of Americans age 18 to 49 who don't have kids say it's not too likely or not likely at all they will procreate someday, an increase of 7 percentage points from 2018. Let's focus on that demographic for a second. 18 to 49. That is a psychotic bucket because what you know ages 18 to let's say 35 about your own likelihood to procreate is going to change a million different ways. Maybe, 18 to 30, men and women. A lot of things, a lot of hormones, a lot of ideas, a lot of life situations will kick in and change your opinion in a million different ways. So the idea of bucketing 18 to 30-year-olds with 40 to 49 is insanity. 40 to 49, the cake is baked. But 18 to 26, your frontal lobe isn't even fully developed, much less your decisions about procreation. This study is nonsense. It is a joke. It is a ridiculous statistic. Let's go on. Many experts point to the rising cost of raising a family as an important factor in Americans' decisions not to have offspring. The expenses are an estimated $310,605. Depending on how you do it, depending on where you live, depending on what schools you send your kids to, depending on what you feed them, there's a lot of variability here. It's not always that expensive. You can keep them in a basement with a bare minimum of lettuce leaves, and I'm sure you can get that cost down pretty significantly, especially if you're doing homeschooling. Kids, let's learn about lettuce, all the different types of lettuces today. Then it goes on to Melissa Carney, a professor of economics at University of Maryland, contends that cultural changes are also causing women to delay or skip motherhood. Americans who were young adults in the 90s or early 2000s grew up with a different set of norms around parenting and women having careers. That's true. People have grown up with different environments, different notions and ideas of what parenting is and whether it's something they want to do. And she goes on, it's not necessarily that people have less of a preference for kids or that it's much more expensive or time consuming. It's the way those two things are interacting for this generation versus prior ones. Okay, a little mushy, but then it goes on to talk about a woman who is the focus of this piece, Miss Marrero. She was married for 4 years before getting divorced in 2008. I think she's 41 or 43 years old. She enjoys an enviable degree of financial independence. She is a West Village resident who owns her own apartment, which she bought in 2019 for $900,000 and then renovated it. And in June, she closed on a summer home in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, with her sister, Christina. So she's a part owner in a summer home. And she's taken 10 trips in the last 12 months, often with friends from a group of about 25 people who are also largely unmarried and don't have children. I found this group so interesting and compelling and fascinating, says Anna Dixon, who recently traveled with Marrero and some other friends. All these people are so smart, so talented, put together, and they don't have kids. They're very independent. All good things, right? The life Marrero and Dixon have chosen does have its drawbacks. People who are single and child-free pay more in taxes, and housing is a lot harder to afford on one income than two, especially with home prices and rents at record highs and mortgage rates on the rise. Another worry for those without children is who will care for them in their old age. For Dixon, the pluses of parenthood don't outweigh the minuses. I like to travel, pick up and go whenever I want to. All sounds great. This sounds like an amazing intellectual exercise, like you're making a decision on which cell phone to buy, a list of pros and cons. But then you get to the very last paragraph. The hero of this story, who is free, liberated, partially owns a summer home, and owns a $900,000 apartment in the city. As for Marrero, she's still paying to store her eggs in case she changes her mind. She's paying to store her eggs in case she changes her mind. So this whole thing was a rationalization. I'm not saying that. This article is saying it. But she's certain that even if she doesn't, she won't feel like she's missed out. Quote, "If you don't have children, it may or may not be a choice, but that should have nothing to do with your happiness. You can be so happy going this route too." There's absolutely nothing wrong with choosing this. But the very fact that she is hedging her bets kind of reminds me of the intro to Idiocracy.
Evolution does not necessarily reward intelligence. With no natural predators to thin the herd, it began to simply reward those who reproduced the most and left the intelligent to become an endangered species.
Having kids is such an important decision.
We're just waiting for the right time. It's not something you want to rush into, obviously.
No way.
Oh, shit, I'm pregnant again!
Shit! I got too many damn kids. Thought you was on the pill or some shit.
Hell no!
Must have been thinking of Brittany.
Brittany? No, you... What? There's no way we could have a child now. Not with the market the way it is, no.
God, no. That just wouldn't make any sense.
Come on over here, bitch! He don't care about you!
Yeah, well, there must be something he likes over here.
You mean nothing to me, baby? Oh, shit. It wasn't me! It wasn't me!
Well, we finally decided to have children, and I'm not pointing fingers, but it's not going well.
And this is helping.
I'm just saying that before I have in vitro, maybe you should be willing to...
It's always me, right?
Well, it's not my sperm count.
Yeah! I'm gonna fuck all y'all! That's my boy!
Cleavon is lucky to be alive. He attempted to jump a jet ski from a lake into a swimming pool and impaled his crotch on an iron gate. But thanks to recent advances in stem cell research and the fine work of Doctors Krinsky and Altshuler, Cleavon should regain full reproductive function.
Put your hands off my junk!
Unfortunately, Trevor passed away from a heart attack while masturbating to produce sperm for artificial insemination. But I have some eggs frozen, so just as soon as the right guy comes along, you know.
And so it went for generations, although few, if any, seemed to notice.
If we're going to have a smart society going forward, we need this woman procreating. And I'm not saying we should force her. She can live whatever life she wants, but this narrative is harmful. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is who the people are weaving this narrative. People like AOC and others talk about childlessness as a virtue.
There's scientific consensus that the lives of children are going to be very difficult. And it does lead, I think, young people to have a legitimate question. You know, is it okay to still have children?
It's an offshoot of the climate narrative. And you'll see it in the New York Times, you'll see it in the Washington Post, you'll see it in all the blogs like HuffPo and BuzzFeed and so on. Oftentimes, it's not with malice, but they're projecting. They're projecting their own rationalizations. They're projecting a vision of the society they want, of the good they want to represent in the world. They want to be environmentally friendly. So I'm not even holding it against them. Once people buy into a narrative, you will start to see a lot of stuff that fits that narrative. I don't think George Soros is on the phone with all these bloggers going, hey, listen, the check's in the mail. Now start writing about childlessness and how great it is. But consider the source, because it's a very monolithic group that goes into writing and media. They are typically single people, writers who live in Brooklyn or somewhere in California. They live very self-centered lives, and their narratives are isolationist. They're not communal. And I know they talk about community and all this stuff, but community starts with family. It starts with extended family. It starts with the people who want the same things for their kids and works its way outward from there. It's not this sort of universal notion. It's like, oh, we, the people of the earth. It's just not how humans work. We work in clans, we work in groups, and that's where the strong bonds are. We need to really be conscious of what is being fed to us and how much ideology has seeped into our reality. It's really pernicious and oftentimes false. And just the narrative of pitting men versus women. It's so toxic to a society, telling people there's glory to be found in corporate boardrooms, or we need to all be making the same thing. They create an artificially adversarial relationship between men and women. That is not how it is. That's not how it's been in history. And that's not how it's going to be going forward. We're so much better together as complements than we are apart as adversaries. Even the positioning in the story, which was to say, oh, well, women earn this much less than men. Yes, it's a partnership. And yeah, maybe this partnership has been strained over the course of the last several decades because, I don't know, lives are longer, they're more complicated, people struggle, there's more divorce. I get it. But the idea that this is optimal is not true. And the focus of this article, Miss Marrero, admits it by her own actions. She's still hedging her bets. And I wish her the best in whatever it is that she wants to do. But I truly think that she'll probably be happier if she's able to do something with those eggs. I don't mean this as any kind of a value judgment. I also held out till everything was perfect. And then guess what? I found out that time was no longer on my side to have kids. But I'm also wise enough finally at this age to realize the errors of my ways. As a guy, I'm experiencing maybe some non-breeder's remorse, but for women, it's 1,000 times worse because guys don't have that same biological clock. We don't have those same emotional biological urges. That's not to say every woman should do this. People should live whatever life they want. But there's only so much career can provide you. And the people preaching materialism over maternalism are Pied Pipers. They're misleading people, telling them that these selfish pursuits are somehow as good or better than the biologically and emotionally satisfying thing that every living creature and every human has ever had to fulfill. That's a lie. It just is. And I'm a modern guy. I'm all for every lifestyle imaginable. As long as you're not harming anyone else, knock yourselves out. Knock yourselves up. Whatever you want to do. But these are lies. And we are now in this strange denial of biological roles, strengths and weaknesses that we each bring to the table that together make us stronger. It's a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's not just adding one income to another income, and therefore you can afford a better apartment or pay a lower tax rate, the way this article breaks it down. It's so much more than that. There is an emotional fulfillment. There is a biological urge and the satisfaction people get from parenting. A father provides something different than a mother does, and we all have our roles. Some roles can be changed, but don't expect there to be no consequences. And some roles we can't opt out of, at least until technology does something. Women can't opt out of being the child bearers, and most men can't opt out of the provider model. No one's going to support us. I'd love to get Liberace to marry me. Or is he still alive? No, he's dead. But okay, let's pick an eligible gay man. Is Elton John single? No, he's spoken for. But Elton John, I would love to be his concubine and have him take care of me. No such luck. I got to go out there and I got to do my own thing. That's the reality for most men. If you go into any boardroom and ask if any of those guys are happy, they're not. And if they are, it's not coming from what happens inside that boardroom. It's coming from elsewhere. And I've known so many smart career women who in their 20s were like, oh, I'm never having kids. I don't want this. Changed their minds, had kids, and it completely reconfigured their priorities. They're like, I can't imagine a life without these little munchkins and having the same priorities I did in my 20s and making career number one or material possessions number one. Of course, that's anecdotal, but I think it rings true. Let's put it that way. And similarly, I know so many others who have been distracted by the false promises of the Sex and the City life, pursuing careerism, materialism instead of maternalism, and essentially being fooled that there's gold in them their hills. There isn't. They're not happy. They're not. And they're desperate. And all the forces today are against them. For example, dating apps. They just create a meat market. And the same 10% of guys will probably hook up with 50 to 60% of the women on the app. Women think they're competing for the top echelon of men when in fact they're being used by them. And that's just how these algorithms work. It's become this accelerated, empty, transactional society where not only are we chasing materialism, we have become the objects of materialism. And that is inherently an empty pursuit.